Hello and welcome to the FatBoss Guide to the Butcher in Highmaul.
And in this video we're going to show you how to kill the boss in both normal and heroic modes, because mechanically the two encounters are the exact same, except heroic just deals more damage.
Now, regardless of your raise size, you always want to bring 2 tanks. If you're in 10-man group, you want to bring around 2 to 3 healers. If you bring 3 healers, the enrage timer might be close. If you're in a 30-man group, you want to bring around 7 healers. And surprisingly, having lots of melee DPS stacked in your composition is actually good for this encounter. So if you can bring melee, do. However, you do want to still bring some range DPS, especially if you can bring 2 hunters. That will help you a lot. It just makes the encounter a lot easier. Now, the Butcher, just like Kargeth, is only one phase, and he just has set abilities that he throws out on a timer. And the most difficult part about this encounter really is the healing and damage requirement. The enrage timer on the boss is quite short, it's 6 minutes. However, your tanks will also be tested because the majority of the mechanics are actually focused at your tanks.
Now, the first mechanic that your tanks will need to deal with is something called heavy-handed. Now, all of Butcher's melee attacks on the tank that he's hitting will also hit a target within 5 yards of him. If there are no targets within 5 yards of that tank, then the tank will get hit twice. So what your tanks need to do, they need to stack up on top of each other, and it means they're both going to be taking a large amount of damage throughout the entire fight.
Also, on Butcher's melee hits, he'll apply something called Cleaver, which is just a flat-out dot that stacks. However, this ability can actually be dodged or parried, so if you have some way of increasing your dodge and parry, it's probably a good idea to keep this up while you are actually tanking him. Now, before you think, maybe I should taunt on so many Cleaver stacks, unfortunately there's another stack you need to worry about, which is the Tenderizer. Now, when Butcher does this ability, you'll hit the tank for a large amount, and it'll leave a debuff that increases the amount of damage that you take from Tenderizer by quite a large amount. So the idea is that you taunt when your debuff has run out, which so happens to be 2.
Now, moving away from the tanks and onto the rest of the raid group, starting off with the main ability that you'll have to deal with throughout the entire encounter, which is Cleave. What the boss will do, he will target the largest clump of players in melee range of him. He will then hit them for a large amount of damage, which is split between all players within that group, and it will leave a debuff on them called Gushing Wounds. This is just a stacking dot debuff that lasts for 15 seconds. However, if you reach 5 stacks of this, you instantly die.
Now, the Cleave ability itself comes in roughly every 6 seconds, and the dot lasts 15 seconds, which means you can get to 5 stacks pretty easily, which means you need to have 2 separate groups. Now, because the Cleave only targets the largest group, you need to have players moving in and out of groups in melee, so one is stacked with more players than the other, so the boss targets that particular group for a Cleave.
And this is where hunters or other very mobile range DPS are very good for this, because what you can do is have your 2 groups in melee with the exact same amount of players. Then you could have one hunter run into group A, for example. They'll get 3 stacks. Then that hunter will leave group A, and the other hunter will run into group B, grab 3 stacks, and by the time they've got 3 stacks, the other group's debuff would have dropped. So all they have to do is keep going in and out, a bit like tag teams sort of going in and out of this, and that's all you need to do in order to make sure that nobody gets 5 stacks.
Now, the amount of people that you want in each group obviously completely depends on how large your raid group, but as an example, if you are a 30-man raid group, you could actually have everyone stacked in each group, minus the 2 people that used to make one group bigger than the other, and of course the 2 tanks, so there'd be 13 in each group. This is a viable tactic, but it means that there's far more dots going out, which means there's actually more damage. It means that the Cleave deals less burst damage on a small group because it's going across 13 people rather than, say, 8. But it means there's actually more to heal. So if you have lots of ground effect healers, such as druids, shamans, or holy priests, this tactic might be better for you. But if you're struggling with that and you're struggling to get all the HPS out, we do recommend that you go down to less players, maybe 7 or 8, something like that, and you'll be absolutely fine. You just need to make sure that someone moves in, so one group is more stacked than the other. As soon as that group has 3 stacks, that player then leaves, and then the player that's supposed to stack the other group then moves in, so the next group is more stacked than the previous.
Now, this is all well and good, however, the boss has one more ability up his sleeve called Bounding Cleave. Now, you might notice that the boss actually has got an energy bar, and this just slowly, gradually goes up throughout the entire encounter. Every time it does reach 100, he'll knock everyone in the raid back, stop and look to see where the largest clump of players are at range. He will then charge them, dealing some damage and also cleaving them, applying Gushing Wounds as well. He will always prioritize a group at range, so even if he had 20 people in melee and 5 people at range, he'll go to the 5 people at range. So you've got to make sure that you do properly organize yourselves.
Now keep in mind, when he does actually find his players at range, the Cleave damage will be exactly the same as his normal Cleave. Which means if you are in a 30-man group, you need to make sure that you have a group at least larger than 5. because otherwise they'll pretty much get one hit. The best way to prepare for this ability when he does do his charge and he cleaves on a group is having that group set up already. There's no need for everyone to run over and to stack up, because if he decided to set up the cleave group so they didn't consist of the entire raid group, anyone that wasn't previously getting hit by cleave can stack on one spot the entire fight and never have to move, and they can be the group of people that get hit by the bounding cleave. We so happened to choose our healers and a couple of ranged DPS that weren't being used to move in and out of melee range. If you do have your entire raid group stacked inside when this bounding cleave sequence goes off, whoever doesn't have high stacks of gushing wounds, you want them all to go run and stand on a single location that you work out before you even pull the boss, and then that way when the boss charges to that group, they'll only get one single stack and you can just go back to stacking how you was previously. One little tip for the bounding cleave is that when the boss does knock everyone back, if you have hunters in your group, this is the best time to use Aspect of the Fox, because it's going to help people do damage while they're flying up in midair. They'll still be able to cast, as well as the healers still being able to heal. And a tip for the healers as well, the best time to use some sort of healing cooldown is when the gushing wound stack is crossed over onto both groups. As soon as one group gets 3 stacks, wait until the second group has then got 2 stacks, and this is the best point to use a big healing cooldown, because this is where it'll be most effective, because it will heal both groups and not just a single group. You still need to make sure that you do keep the group that's actually taking the cleaves alive. You need to make sure you spot heal them so they don't die between these cleaves.
Now, one last thing before the Butcher can slam his face into the floor is that at 30% health, he goes into a frenzy. This will increase his damage dealt by 10%, and his attacks will be 30% faster. That means that he will be cleaving 30% more often, he will gain energy 30% more quickly, so he'll be knocking you back and doing the bounding cleave 30% more often, and generally he's going to be wailing on your tanks and doing all the horrible tank debuffs 30% more often. So at this point, this is when you want to lust. If you can save lust for this point, then it will just help you a hell of a lot more just to try and get through this last 30% as soon as you possibly can, because really this is the hardest part of the entire encounter, just trying to get him down before he goes too insane.
Saving cooldowns for this point will make it so much easier to heal, because the damage on the cleave groups is going to go much higher because you are forced to go to 4 cleave stacks at this point. The boss does cleave so much quicker that you can't go 3 in one group, 3 in another, 3 in one group, 3 in another, because it'll just overlap and you'll end up getting 5 stacks, so you need to go 4 and 4. Which means that the Gushing Wound stack is going to be hitting much harder because, you know, it's 1 more stack, but it's also 10% more damage on the boss. So saving big cooldowns for this point is extremely important. As we said at the start of the video, the enrage time on this boss is very tight, and if you are in this last 5 to 10% mark and he does enrage, the best thing you can do is spread out. Have everyone spread out, because when he starts his bounding cleave sequence, when he charges to a largest group of players, if the largest group of player is a single person, because everyone is spread out, only one person will get hit by it and only one person will die from it.
However, if there are no melee targets, which is highly likely to be hit by the cleave, he magically manages to cleave random people around the room. So basically, if the boss is enraging, you've probably got about maybe 10-15 seconds to get the motherfucking down before he goes absolutely insane. But hopefully you won't have to see that. So assuming that you do have the healing and the damage required, and you literally just constantly make sure you keep on top of these cleave stacks and swapping them at the correct times, the boss is relatively easy to do. The only thing is just you need to have the damage for it, flat out.
But as always, guys, thank you very much for watching. If this guide did help you out, made you get the kill, please do drop us down a like. It helps us out a lot.
And if you want to see any more of our heroic Highmaul guides, they are up on the screen now, so just click on the annotation. That'll take you straight over to that boss. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.
See ya.